Hello, everyone, and good morning. My name is Brianna Jones, and I am the Assistant Director at the Leadership Institute at Columbus State University. We welcome you to our Disruptive Leadership series. We appreciate you carving out an hour of your time to spend with us this morning, and we hope to make this time very interactive and engaging. So we will be using the Q&A feature throughout, and I will pause the moderator throughout to take questions from the audience. So today's webinar will be facilitated by Christina Martin, and Christina is a certified life coach and trainer who loves solving people-oriented problems. Throughout her career, she has sought to nurture and evoke strategies and a plan of action based on what best matches the objective and vision of each organization and each individual. Christina has traveled all over the country training, presenting, and coaching executives and professionals on how to bridge the gap between their goals and the activities needed to achieve them. She's passionate about providing her audience with learning and coaching experiences that encourage self-reflection in a non-judgmental and empathetic environment. Christina received her coaching certification from the International Association of Certified Coaches and is also Lean Six Sigma Green Belt. Please help me welcome Christina in the chat. As I said, I will pause us throughout to offer up my reflection and to moderate the chat, but for now, I'll turn it over to you, Christina.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much, Brianna, for having me. I am Christina Martin. I'm a leadership consultant with the Leadership Institute here at Columbus State, and I am so excited to be here with all of you today. So let's get started. Let me share my screen, and we are going to dive in to You're Too Emotional. Get you guys over here. All right, so let's get started. First thing I want to do is start off by sharing the agenda with you and let you know how we're going to spend our time together. So we're going to start off exploring emotions and their benefits in the workplace. Then I'm going to share best practices for communicating your emotions at work and also managing your emotions at work. And then we're going to take action with what we've learned today and we're going to put it to good use. So before I start, I just want to tell you, you're going to need pen and paper for a short exercise that we're going to do here in a moment. So please go ahead, take a moment, get pen and paper. So let's talk about the statement, you're too emotional. First up, I want to ask this in the chat. Has anybody heard this statement before? Have you been on the receiving end of that statement, you're too emotional? Let me know in the chat. And Brianna's going to be manning the chat for me, so she's going to let me know what your responses are, and I'm excited to hear. Have any of you heard this before? Brianna, do we have any responses yet?
Yes, we just got one response that came in, and this person says yes, just like I have experienced it as well, hearing this phrase.
I have definitely been on the receiving end of this phrase, probably one too many times. And every time it left me feeling disappointed, defeated. I felt hopeless, confused, and I'm gonna be honest, I felt angry because I could not figure out how to solve this problem that was being brought to me by the other person, right? And when I could think of a solution, the only one that came to mind was, I'm going to stop showing any emotion ever, which if you know me or any other human being for that fact, it is pretty much impossible. So a few years ago, I attended a conference that changed the way that I think and feel about emotions at work. And the speaker asked the audience if any of us had ever heard that specific phrase at work, you're too emotional. And everyone in the audience at that time raised their hand. Then she turned around and asked us, now, what does that even mean? She said, do you cry? Are you too excited? Are you too passionate? Are you somebody who's quick to anger? Or do you just shut down? She pointed out to each of us that that statement is simply too broad to help us create any type of plan towards self-improvement for ourselves. And the advice that she gave us was, the next time you hear that statement from someone, she challenged us. She said, I want you to turn to them and say, what do you mean by that statement? And then I want you to ask them for details or examples of the specific behavior that they're actually wanting to address with you. Now, that advice for me, it inspired me to take the first step towards dealing with my emotions at work through using my own voice. But for me, I knew that that was literally just the first step to me understanding not only how to better communicate my emotions at work, but how to manage them as well. And so from that experience, You're Too Emotional was born. So I'm extremely excited to share it with you. So now this is when that pen and paper is going to come in handy in just a second. One of my favorite tools to use when I'm training is self-reflection. And I love the quote by John Dewey that says, we do not learn from experiences, we learn from reflecting on the experiences. And he is absolutely correct. Self-reflection is what gives us a chance to take an impartial look at our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, and our actions. So I'm going to walk you through a brief exercise where I'll ask you a question, it'll appear up on the screen, and then I'm going to give you a short amount of time to write down your response. The great thing about this exercise is we're not going to share our responses. Okay, so I want you to feel free to be open and honest with your answers. Self-reflection it's a great resource for helping us examine the why behind what happened. But my favorite part on the flip side of that coin is that it allows us to explore what next. So yes, this happened, but what am I going to do afterwards? So I want you to use the answers that you give during the exercise and use those as a guide to help you determine what information that I share or what best practices are going to help you on your journey with your emotions in the workplace. All right, get started. Our first self-reflection question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, ew, I'm not good at that, and 10 being, oh girl, I'm my best. How would you rate your ability to manage your emotions at work? I'm going to give you 20 seconds to answer that. Your time starts now. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your ability to manage your emotions at work? Are you a 1? Ew. Are you a 10? Can't be beat.
And I'll hop in here, Christina. I think I am about at an 8. Not for my face, because my face usually tells it all, but internally, and as far as not letting my emotions impact, my to-do tasks, I think I'm about an 8.
That's a really good number. That's a really good number. My face is probably what holds me back on my score as well. I'd probably say I'm not an 8, but I'd probably say I'm about a 7, 7.5. But my face doesn't read the same as what I'm thinking in my mind. So that's my problem. All right, we're going to the next question, everybody. Next up, when it comes to your emotions at work, which one do you struggle with the most? Is it communicating your emotions, hiding your emotions, or controlling your emotions? I'm going to give you 30 seconds to write down your answer, and your time starts now. When it comes to your emotions at work, which one do you struggle with the most? 15 seconds. All right, we're going to move on. But since Brianna shared hers last, I'm going to share my answer to that, even though you guys don't have to share your answers. I struggle the most with communicating my emotions. That's the one that I struggle with the most. All right, now for this next question, I want to know which statement rings more true for you. The way I manage my emotions at work is what gives me an advantage and sets me apart from others, or it's part of what holds me back professionally. Which statement rings more true for you? The way I manage my emotions at work is what gives me an advantage and sets me apart from others, or it's part of what holds me back professionally? You've got 30 seconds to answer that question.
I like that question, Christina. That's good. For me, I think my response would be it gives me an advantage. And I say that because in my past experiences, just working alongside a colleague who wasn't able to manage their emotions well, I saw the impacts of how that could hold them back professionally. So for me, I think the way that I am able to kind of shut it off and turn it off once I leave the elevator, I think that gives me an advantage professionally, in my opinion.
I agree. At this stage in my career, it is now my advantage. I like it. All right, last question. All right, I'm going to give you 45 seconds on this one. I want you to reflect on an emotional conversation that you experienced at work. What do you now wish you would have done differently? This conversation could have been yesterday. It could have been 3 years ago. Reflect on that conversation. Write down, what do you now wish you would have done differently? Time starts now. Twenty seconds. All right, that's time. So now I want us to get into anything about emotions. So what are emotions? An emotion is defined as a natural instinctive state of mind deriving from one's circumstances, mood, or relationships with others. So, layman's terms, emotions are chemicals that are released in response to your interpretation of a specific trigger or a specific event. Okay, so this is how we are interpreting what's happened to us in the moment. So I want to ask you a question in the chat. Are emotions and feelings the same thing? Somebody tell me in the chat box, are emotions and feelings the same thing?
And while we're waiting for some responses to come in, Christina, based on your last reflection question, what is something you wish you would have done differently? A comment came in. So Sam says, listen and clarify / mirror, but also keep my mouth shut.
Ooh, Sam, that is good. There have been plenty of times that back in my past, I wish I would have learned that quicker than later. All right. Are emotions and feelings the same thing? Brianna, you want to take a spin at that one?
Sure, I certainly will. I was going to say, I don't know the answer to that, Christina. In my mind, yes, it seems like the same thing, having an emotion and a feeling. I think that it first comes that emotion, and then secondly comes that physical feeling. So that's my take on it.
So a lot of people like to use the word feelings and emotions interchangeably. And until I did my research on this topic, I used to do that many years ago. But the truth is, they are not the same thing, right? Our emotions and feelings are two different things. So let's take a look at some of the differences between our emotions and feelings. So our feelings absolutely can play a part in our emotions, but they actually make up, they're only one of 4 components that go into what makes up an emotion. So let's look at some of the other important things about emotions up on the screen. So emotions, again, specific reactions to certain events that we've experienced. They include our cognitive and physiological changes. the third point is my favorite point. Emotions help prime our bodies to act in a certain way. Your emotions are what tell your body, okay, girl, this is what we're about to do next because of what's going on right now in this moment. And we can manifest our emotions both consciously and subconsciously. Also, one of the other things to note on the other side, underneath feelings, is that feelings are not necessarily related to an emotion. You can feel tired or you can feel cold without a certain emotion tied to that as well. All right. So next up, and Brianna already gave her opinion on this, but which comes first, emotions or feelings? Truth is that your emotions come first, like she said, she was right, and then your feelings come after. So as the emotion chemicals go to work in our bodies, then the feeling comes up, right? So here's some food for thought. This is something I've grappled with over the years, and my answer has teeter-tottered over time. But do our emotions belong in the workplace? If you would have asked me that several years ago, my answer was, look, as long as it's a positive emotion, yes. If it was a negative emotion, I would have told you it was a no-go. I considered my negative emotions at work to be a mistake. I considered them to be a weakness. I also considered them to be a liability to me professionally. So I think it's important for me to share with you some of the benefits of our emotions in the workplace. Because I read something from the Harvard Business Review, and they did a research study that shows that our emotions in the workplace can influence our creativity, our decision making, our quality of work, the level of commitment that we bring to the table, our employee retention, and also, which we love employee retention, and employee engagement. Yesterday, Brianna sent me an amazing podcast that I listened to, and it had a story in it that I heard before, and I wanted to make sure that I shared it. And I love the story of Brad Bird. He's a Pixar executive who made the intentional decision that he was going to go out and look for and hire frustrated animators to work on a new film, because he truly believed that they would be most likely to lead the charge for change to make things better. And part of that group ended up creating The Incredibles, right? The animated box office hit. So now, am I telling you to go out and hire a group of pissed off employees tomorrow? Not necessarily, okay? But what I am telling you, and this gives me hope, is that there are leaders out there who understand the importance of different emotions and how to hone those emotions for good in the workplace. Now, let's take a look at some of the most common emotions at work. I got this from a research study that was performed by Quantum Workplace, and they wanted to take a look at how employee emotions can relate to employee engagement. So they found the top 3 most positive emotions at work are feeling comfortable, it's all about being satisfied, they're enthusiastic. Now, what's on the right hand of the screen? Look, I don't struggle with sharing the fact that I'm satisfied or comfortable or enthusiastic at work. But when you're talking about the right side, that's where the issue comes in for me. So the negative emotions at work, top 3, frustrated, I'm stressed, I'm anxious. Now, how do we go about even beginning the work to communicate those types of emotions in the workplace? Let me share some of the best practices with you on how to do that. Before I dive in, I do want to say this. Before you choose to enter into any types of conversations around emotions with other people, please remember that you can only control your own behavior, your own thoughts and emotions. So I want you to put your effort into ensuring that you're putting your best foot forward for your portion of the conversation, because the rest is up to the other person to decide, right? We cannot control them, so nor shall we try. All right, so first things first, you want to start by identifying the emotion that you're feeling. Before I go into communicating it, I want to know, what is it? So I want you to make the conscious decision to become aware of what you're feeling on the inside. And when it comes to having conversations around your emotions, especially at work, preparation is key. So let's start there. The next best practice, I love this resource, It's the emotion wheel. There are all kinds of different emotion wheels with all kinds of different colors and categories that you can use. You can Google them, but the basis around this is it's a circular graphic that's divided into sections and then subsections to help you better identify and understand your emotional experience at any given time under any circumstance. I love the emotion wheel and I actually use it. My next best practice is all about expanding your emotional vocabulary. When you're preparing to have conversations around your emotions, sometimes telling somebody, you know, I'm sad or I'm happy, it just might not cut it. So the more specific and detailed that you can be, the more productive your communication is going to be. So I want you to ask yourself, what would you call the emotion that you're feeling? Is it simply anger or sadness? Or is it more like disappointment or resentment? Okay, what else could be behind what you're feeling?
And I like the fact that you talked about identifying the emotion first, because Christina, I know that I'm not alone in this in saying when I have an emotionally charged conversation, I'm just spewing out things versus starting with, you know, the actual emotion and having some, you know, expanding my vocabulary around that. So I'm not just feeling sad, but I'm depressed in this moment, or it's not that I'm confused, but I'm uncertain about where we stand with this process now that we've talked about all the action steps. So I like that identifying the emotion prospect. I do like that.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do because I look at it like this. If I were to go to a leader and tell them I'm confused, I think that elicits one response. But if I instead go back and say I'm uncertain about the outcome of this, that elicits a whole nother conversation. So that's why I think it's so important for us to expand that vocabulary. My next best practice comes from a good girlfriend, Taylor, and I love this. She shared this advice with me. She said before she enters into any conversation surrounding her emotions, she always makes sure to ask herself, am I addressing the right audience? Is this the right person to have this conversation with? Are you going to be able to help me to move this situation forward? If the answer is yes, it's a go. If it's not, okay, this is not the right person for me to be talking to. Let me now decide who I should be speaking with about this. All right, next up, this is something that's near and dear to my heart. So as a coach, I specialize in mindset and confidence coaching. And that is because your mindset is the foundation for everything that you do. Your mindset determines your thoughts. Your thoughts determine your behavior. Your behavior determines your actions, and your actions determine your potential for success. So I'm asking you to reframe your thinking around having conversations around your emotions. So a lot of us are walking into these conversations seeing this as a problem, and this problem is a threat. But there is research that shows when we see things as a threat, it is directly linked to a decrease in our performance, decreases in our motivation, and also the worst, increases in our stress level. So if you can reframe that and instead of seeing this as a problem, look at it as a challenge. Okay, so it's no longer a threat. This is a challenge to me to have this conversation, to communicate my emotions. This is going to help you to better focus on and simply concentrate on the task in front of you and the steps that you need to take to be successful at addressing it. Just like it says on the screen, are you facing a problem or are you addressing a challenge? All right, next up, I want you to determine your goal for this conversation. Okay, before you communicate your emotions, before you move forward, I want you to decide, what am I trying to get out of this? Do you want an apology? Are you looking for the person to change their behavior? Maybe you simply just want more training, or I'm just looking for a safe space to express myself. Either way it goes, if you give yourself a clear goal for what you'd like to achieve during this conversation, that will serve as a guide for you to lead you in the best key points to bring up and the best things to help direct your communication with the other person. One of my favorites.
And Christina, before you move on to your next point, I do have a question that just came in. So there are a lot of people who have who can identify with audience being key. So there's some people in the comments who understand what you're saying there. But the question that I had come in is, how do you react to a person whose emotion is too overwhelming for you to handle?
That's a really good question. I'm actually going to give some tips on that shortly, but I will tell you that one of the things that I do if the emotion is too much is we take a break. The first thing I'm going to do is create space for that person to process, maybe to reset, to calm down. And I've also allowed people to communicate in different ways. Sometimes the emotion is too overwhelming. It's hard for people to say it to you. I've had people write it down and send it in emails, and then we discussed it after that because the initial delivery was a little bit too difficult. So I always consider thinking outside of the box. The way I communicate is not necessarily for other people. So absolutely take a break and then look for creative ways to allow them to express themselves.
I like that, Christina, because all of us aren't, equipped to express our emotions in that moment, especially when we're having, somebody kind of put us on the spot. So yes, definitely taking a break and giving each other opportunity to breathe, as well as trying to find some creative ways to actually express that emotion, rather that's through email or through a journal entry. So yes, I like that.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a great question for whoever asked. Thank you for sending that in. All right. So next up, I love this one. Okay. Later in my career, I would tell you that this is probably one of the smartest things I would do before entering into these types of discussions. I would ask myself, is the juice worth the squeeze? So is this conversation going to be worth my time? Is it worth the effort I'm going to put in preparing for it? Is it worth the potential for conflict and misunderstanding that could arise from this conversation? And I'm going to tell you at least two things I use to help myself determine if the juice is worth the squeeze. Number one, I'm going to look at the pattern of behavior prior to for the person that I'm discussing this with. Okay. What has their pattern of behavior been with me? Or what has it been with my colleagues who tried to have this conversation with the person before? And I would use that to try to weigh my options. Next up, I would also weigh my potential for success in achieving the goal that I had for the conversation. And there are times that I decided this isn't worth it. There were other times I decided, look, I will gladly die on this hill 7 times over like a gladiator. Okay. So the other thing I do want to share that I think is important for me to tell y'all, there were also times that I absolutely knew in my mind, I'm never going to get the desired outcome that I want. But I still decided that I was going to have the conversation because for me, building the muscle was more important to me. So it was more important that I learned how to have these types of conversations, that I learned how to better stick up for myself in professional settings or how to strengthen my confidence. Or I was like, look, I want to take the steps and just experiment with navigating difficult conversations like this. And so those times I decided the juice was worth the squeeze, but it's definitely something you should be asking yourself up front.
Someone in the chat, Christina, used another phrase, choose your battles is what I call that.
Lovely. I use that one as well. Absolutely. Sometimes it's just not worth it, right? Next up, don't be afraid to practice the conversation with somebody you trust. There is nothing wrong with working through your plan of communication to make sure that what you're conveying is what's absolutely most important to you. So practice having that conversation with a trusted partner, have them ask you questions, have them push back, just to make sure that you're going to be able to communicate your thoughts and your emotions clearly and calmly. This is something I do all the time. You should practice. Now, when we are preparing to communicate our emotions to other people, here are a few points that I make sure to address when I'm getting myself ready. Number one, I want to state what happened from my vantage point, okay? Your emotions, chemical responses to events. So I want to tell them what happened from the way that I see it. Next, I need to tell them the impact that the event had on me. Let me tell you, I cannot tell you how many times I've entered into conversations with people about my emotions and never asked them for what I really wanted. Like the outcome I was hoping for, never addressed it. So I always make sure I'm asking for what I want. What's the goal? So if that's an apology, if it's more training, if it's more time from that leader, whatever it is, I'm going to ask for it. And I always make sure that I'm allowing the other person to respond. There is something to be learned from their responses. And sometimes it's, oh, okay, I didn't think of it that way, or this is a misunderstanding, or sometimes, very rarely, I'm wrong. Never happens, actually. And then sometimes I find out you are a worse person than I thought you were before I sat down, okay? So make sure you allow the other person to speak and also share things from their vantage point as well. Up, when you're practicing with your trusted partner, I want you to also practice staying calm, being present, and patient during the conversation. The more that we can remain calm and speak in an even, calm tone, the easier it's going to be for us to stay in control of our emotions during the conversation. Here's the deal. I want you to be present in the conversation, because let me tell you how it goes. We start talking, the person responds, and now I'm not even listening because I'm getting ready to let you know. And I pretty much missed the majority of what you said, and some of it was actually helpful and useful for the discussion, okay? Here's the other thing to remember. The point of this conversation is not for you to match the other person's energy. It is for you to set the tone for the energy that you want them to match, okay? Remember, we are only in control of our own emotions, so we want to set the tone for that. All right. So we've covered best practices for communicating our emotions, and now let's take some action. I'm going to give you all 1 minute to write down on your paper, what will you start doing when you're communicating your emotions at work, and what will you stop doing when you're communicating your emotions at work, okay? I'm going to give you 1 minute, and then we're going to dive into the best practices for managing our emotions at work. All right, so your 1 minute starts now.
Christina, while we are, giving them that minute to write down a plan of action, I did have a question that popped into my head when you were going over the framework of the questions you should ask before the conversation. What if you don't have time to outline, your goal, what you're trying to get out of this meeting? Should you still have the conversation, even if you haven't been able to go through those steps?
That's a great question. And my answer for me is no. If I don't prepare, it must not be worth the squeeze. I'm communicating my emotions to someone. It's obviously, and let me tell you, I let things go on a little bit too long. So by the time I say something, I'm about to explode. I've let it happen too long, which is on me. And if I can't put in the time to prepare to make sure, number one, I'm staying above the board, I'm communicating factual points, I'm respectful during that communication, I'm not going to leave it up to chance. I'm going to take a few moments just to prepare.
I like that. I like that. It's not worth the squeeze if you don't have the time to prepare. That goes to show the priority and the importance that conversation or expressing that emotion is.
Absolutely. And that's a great question. Thank you for asking. All right. Your minute is up. Does anybody want to share what they might start or stop doing when communicating their emotions at work? Does anybody have one that they don't mind sharing in the chat? Brianna, do you have one?
I think going, and let me put my face on the screen so y'all are seeing, I think I would stop going into the conversation unprepared. The minute I realize that emotion, that feeling is there, it's time to reflect on that. It's time to figure out the root cause. So for me, I think the best thing that has come from this is being able to go into the conversation with a plan. And it sounds, it sounds a little silly, when you're thinking about planning, to have the conversation. But like you said, you don't want to go into the meeting and just spew out your emotions and then don't get to the action item or the goal you're trying to accomplish, or the root cause of why that issue, why you had that feeling. And Taylor said that she will stop holding back how she really feels.
I like it. I like it. Very good. Thank you both for sharing. I like those answers. All right, let's talk about best practices for how to manage our emotions at work. And this is just as important as communicating it to other people. So what I'm asking you all to do, and I'm challenging you to do, is to choose to regulate your emotions versus suppressing your emotions at work. So when we suppress our emotions, we are literally avoiding any outward display of our inner feelings, which can lead to a host of issues, but most importantly, like physical stress on the body and on the mental. We don't want to do that. Emotional regulation is instead all about your ability to effectively manage and respond to the experience. So regulating our emotions is what's going to give us a chance to respond to different type of experiences that we encounter in a host of ways that you deem to be appropriate and suitable for the situation that you're in. All right. So I'm going to continue to give you some tips to help you regulate your emotions at work. One of the first things I like to do, if you are looking for a tried and true way to manage your emotions at work, write it down. Okay, write down what you want to say. And if you want to take it into the meeting or into the conversation, you absolutely should. I do it all the time. I make bullet points of my key points. I'm going to put the other 4 points that I shared with you before. I make sure on that piece of paper, I'm stating it from my vantage point. I'm telling them the impact. I'm asking for what I want, and I'm remembering to allow them to respond to me. Use those notes so that you can stay focused, so that you can stay on task, and to the best of your ability, remain untriggered for as long as you can by the person, by the topic, or by the circumstance that you're currently in. Write it down. Take deep breaths. Your breath can help calm you down in situations when emotions are high, right? When you feel your emotions start to bubble up, don't panic. Take a deep breath, work to recognize the emotion for what it is. One of the exercises that I use in the middle of the meeting, and people usually never notice, I breathe out twice as long as I inhale, okay? So when we inhale, it increases our heart rate, it increases our blood pressure. When we exhale, it slows them down, all right? So I will exhale twice as long as I inhale to help calm me down, again, helping me stay present and be more patient during the conversation. We need to do a better job of recognizing the signs of our physical triggers, right? I'm asking you to tune into yourself and consider, in what parts of my body am I noticing sensations right now? So maybe your palms start to sweat, maybe your jaw tightens up, you might feel your leg jumping underneath the desk, or if you're like me, my stomach drops. It's like I'm on a roller coaster of chaos, right? So if we can remain calm, this is going to allow us to clearly be able to recognize those physical triggers, to allow you to take action with maybe your deep breathing exercise or one of the other tips I'm going to give you here in just a minute. But as your body starts to tell you, okay, girl, it is fight or flight, we're going to listen to that so you know what to do next. One of the things you might choose to do.
I like that, Christina. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to touch base on what you said. I think that's really important because, you go into these meetings and then the minute, your boss looks over at their laptop, you're automatically, You're no longer controlling the situation. You're no longer calm. But if I would have known, or had that self-awareness of what are some things when I'm having a conversation, what will trigger me, I think that's good. And we had someone comment and say, that's a great question. I'm going to say they're not the same thing. I find power posing helps before going into an emotionally volatile situation.
Oh, I love and absolutely positively believe in the power pose. I have never done it before an emotional conversation. Whoever said that, if I had a hat on, I would take it off for you, dear. I love that suggestion, and I'm actually going to do that and suggest that to people in the future because I actually do power poses. So that's a great idea. Thank you. And yes, I think part of my journey was figuring out that I was not listening to my body. And that's how emotionally I was able to go, for myself, in my opinion, a little bit too far, because I was ignoring all of the signs that, hey, girl, you going downhill right now. Okay, it's about to get bad. And I just kind of kept on going. Instead, what I should have done was taken a break. If you feel like you are losing control, or you might just need a break so that you can process or kind of reset the mind, ask to take a break. Create space for yourself. I mentioned that earlier. I am almost embarrassed to tell you how long it took before I knew that I could take a break during emotionally charged conversations. It was actually one of the former CEOs I had that sat us down, a bunch of us at that time in my career, and shared that. And at that moment, I truly didn't know I even had the right to ask to take a break during a conversation like that. And one of the other things that she shared with us was like, look, you don't even have to tell people why you need a break. Just simply ask to be excused or tell them you have to go to the bathroom. Go recenter yourself before you return to the conversation or the meeting. So please don't be like me. Take breaks. All right.
And Andrew also agrees with that. He says that taking breaks is a great way, and also in that break, asking if there are any questions. So doing a little bit of self-reflection in that break as well.
I like that, Andrew. Very good. Yes, I'm much better about doing it now that I know that I can. I know how to ask. And that I've never had one person tell me no. If I asked to go to, they said, okay, sure. Right. And I was like, why wasn't I doing this, 3 years ago? All right. Make sure that you are asking for time to process. Okay. Don't feel compelled to respond in the moment if you're not comfortable. If you feel yourself bubbling up, ask for time to process and to respond later to what you've heard. After many, many years of either feeling or actually being pressured to respond in the moment, I found out that this doesn't work for me. And every time that I would do self-reflection, I would always regret responding so quickly. So I tell you what, I don't do it anymore. And I will tell you this, on several occasions, I've dealt with people who did not care for the fact that I would not respond immediately. But I did not let that deter me from doing what was right for me. Anybody who knows me, my number one strength is strategic. Okay, so professionally, I am playing chess. I'm not playing checkers with you. So for me, there was power in recognizing and owning the fact that I got to choose how I was going to respond to that person. The other thing I would say, if you decide that you need time to process and to respond, please let the person know when you intend to provide them the information. Don't say, hey, give me time to process this, and then 3 weeks go by and they haven't heard from you. Okay, so let them know, let me sleep on it tonight, or can we talk about this next week in my one-on-one, and then provide them with the information as well. All right. Next up, this is important, and I just made this mistake yesterday. Don't judge yourself for how you feel, okay? It only makes things worse. So I did a presentation yesterday, and at the beginning of the presentation, I wanted to take a moment to show appreciation to the woman who had invited me and had played a really huge part in where my life is right now. It was huge. I had planned for it. I had practiced what I was going to say, never once felt an inkling of emotion. And then at the beginning of the presentation, I tell her thank you, and I cried in front of the audience. I was mortified. Okay. Let me tell you something. Telling myself I'm a horrible person for crying in a meeting, I don't know why, but it doesn't make me stop crying. It makes me cry more. Okay. And then I literally had to stop myself and was like, girl, look, this is where we are. Everybody knows why you cry, girl. So look, instead of judging yourself, use your energy to instead put a name to the emotion, maybe to extend your emotional vocabulary, use some of that, or focus on the why behind the emotion. Because here's the truth. Why did I cry? Because I was joyful, because I was extremely appreciative of this person, right? So don't worry about judging yourself. Let's get down to the why of what you're feeling in the moment. All right.
That's good, Christina. And a lot of people agree not judging yourself is huge. I also, this prompted me to think about, so when you're dealing with emotions, and yes, you're not supposed to judge yourself for having these emotions, but what if you have an issue or a conflict or just not seeing eye to eye with someone who will use those emotions against you? So what do you do when you're interacting with someone who could possibly, well, in the past has used those emotions that have came out in that conversation against that person?
If the conversation is for me, or even if I'm trying to have that conversation on the behalf of someone else with someone who uses emotions as a weapon, I'm going to go to my number one strength, which is strategic for me. I'm going to get strategic about this conversation. I'm going to plan for it. And what I'm going to bring to the table is their currency, what matters to them. It's obviously not the emotion. So what I need to impart on this person is the impact of their behavior on something that matters to them. So when you do this thing, Brianna, it ends up causing a negative impact to the bottom line or to employee morale, or, it makes my productivity decrease. Whatever is important to that person, I'm going to communicate with them on their terms if I understand and can deem that you don't necessarily care about the emotion that you're bringing out in people or the weaponization of it. I'm going to communicate with them on something that matters to them.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's a part of knowing your audience as well.
I agree. And that's a great point. This next one, this comes to me from my other good friend, Brian. Let me tell you something. He always talks about the stories we tell ourselves. Go, ooh, boy, do we do it. And for me, this leads right back to taking a break or asking for time to process in the moment. All too often, when you're sitting in a situation and there's an absence of information, sometimes even when there's not, we'll fill in the blanks with our own details. And there's nothing that your mind loves more than a good old story. And by good story, I mean a negative one, just to be clear, okay? We love negativeness. So what I'm going to challenge you to do is look for the proof. Where's the evidence behind the emotion that you're feeling? And I'm going to tell you what I tell my coaching clients all the time. This is my rule of thumb, even in my own life. If you can't prove it, you can't think it. So I'm going to look for proof and evidence behind what I'm feeling. All right. Next up, self-assess. After having conversations where I'm working to manage my emotions in the moment at work, I'm going to take some time afterwards to really just self-assess my progress. So what went well? What didn't go well? How did the other person respond? How did I feel when I was communicating my emotions to you and sharing details? What did I learn from this situation? Again, self-assessment. For me, it is a clear path to progress and self-improvement because I am looking back to determine how I'm going to move forward with this particular thing. All right. And then I want to give some honorable mentions to a couple of other ways to help us regulate our emotions. So meditation, I put problem solving up there. That goes back to reframing the way we think about it. Whether it's journaling or drawing, physical activity, dancing, walking, exercises, anything that uses the body. We're going to talk through our emotions with a trusted friend, a mentor, a colleague. The other thing, let's try to maintain healthy relationships. Sometimes when we're encountering a lot of emotional distress in the workplace or in our personal lives, it's due to the fact that we're not necessarily in the healthiest of relationships with those people. And then also focus on what your emotions are trying to tell you. Your emotions can be great signs or notes to self, but they can also be red flags and warnings. All right, so pay attention to what your emotions are trying to relay to you. All right, action. I'm going to give you 1 minute. I want you to write down for yourself, when it comes to managing your emotions at work, what are you going to start doing and or stop doing? Your minute starts now.
Thank you, Christina. While we're waiting for everybody to complete their self-reflection, can you go back to that last nugget that you dropped? If you can't prove it, we can't think it or fix it. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Oh, yes. We are looking for proof in what we see. So sometimes I'll have certain emotions around certain things. I've had a certain reaction based on an experience with another person at work. And I've completely narrated what happened in their mind. And I said, I'm going to tell you what he thought. When he walked off, he said to himself, I bet you, Christina. And then I asked myself, well, when did you hear him say that? Well, I mean, I didn't hear him say it. Okay, well, when did he write it to you in an email? I mean, he's never wrote it. Well, did he tell somebody else who told you that he said it? No. If I can't and don't have any concrete proof or evidence in what I'm thinking and feeling, then I'm going to kind of go back to the drawing board. And sometimes I'll tell my friends this all the time, make it a note to self. It doesn't mean I let it go and just forget about it. I just make a note to self. Okay, this is questionable. I'm not sure, but I'm going to look for more evidence before I allow myself to kind of, drive myself off a cliff like Thelma and Louise.
Thank you, Christina.
Awesome. All right, your minute is up. Brianna, I'm going to ask you, dear, is there anything you think you're going to start or stop doing when it comes to managing your emotions at work?
Yes, and I'm just trying to be producer and moderator here in the background. Y'all don't mind me, but yes, I will start trying to figure out what the other person's currency is. So I like that idea of approaching them, kind of putting on their hat and their cognitive style of thinking and approaching the conversation from that level. So I think that that's the most important thing that I could start doing to start managing my emotions at work, because if I don't do that and I just go in there with my own perspective, how Brianna would want to receive that information, I'm going to lose them, and I am not going to get the outcome that I wanted because they're not listening to me, and I didn't set the tone the way I needed to.
Oh, I like that. I like it. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Food for thought. I bring this question back up for one last time. So I shared with you earlier what I used to think about whether our emotions belong in the workplace. And now I'm going to tell you how I feel. My answer is absolutely. My journey to dealing with my emotions at work, good Lord, has been a long one, but it's been worth every single ounce of effort that I put into it, because I now know that the way I communicate and manage my emotions is one of my superpowers, and it's what helps to make me amazing at what I do. So for me, my emotions are no longer something I need to run from or I need to look down on, right? And instead, it's something that I need to continue to encourage myself around and empower myself to speak up and to help better manage my emotions and how I communicate those to others. So I wanted to share really quickly before we ask for any questions or takeaways, resources. Brianna did an amazing job and sent me some resources yesterday, so I took a look at them. I loved the Harvard Business Review IdeaCast podcast, Sad, Mad, Anxious, How to Work Through Your Big Feelings. It's only 30 minutes. And the podcaster featured Liz Folson and Molly West Duffy, who are also the authors of Big Feelings, How to Be Okay When Things Are Not Okay. And this also addresses emotions in the workplace. And I literally have this book on my list to read next after I finish the book that I'm on. So I wanted to make sure I provide some resources for anybody who wants to take this subject just a little bit further for yourself and look into it a little bit more. So we're going to open it up quickly for any takeaways and questions. And then Brianna, I'm going to turn it over to you to do what's next after this.
Awesome, Christina. Thank you. So Andrew, he said, I think for me, the biggest reflection I have to start doing is knowing that I may be walking into a meeting or conversation that I have emotions going into this. Knowing that allows me to take a deep breath and better deliver my message.
Oh, I like that. That's really important. I like that. Recognizing what am I about to walk into?
Yes, Sarah Jones, Sarah June, such a lovely name. My start is similar to what I said. If someone isn't likely to care about me as a human, consider instead what is their currency, what is their motivation. This is great advice for dealing with difficult people.
Agreed. I love it. Awesome. All right. And you know what, Brianna, I think I need to now do your Too Emotional edition for leaders. So I can help them to deal with emotions and help them to help their team members to manage emotions. So thanks to you all and the feedback you're sharing. I know now I need to go ahead and get started and put that together. All right.
Yes, I know it, Christina. Today has been wonderful, and I love that we have actual practical steps to take in having those conversations. So just referring to that outline and answering those questions before you go into that conversation. I know that's just one of the gems that I will definitely be using in the future.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, I want to give Brianna a chance to share with you what's coming up next from the Leadership Institute. So I'm going to let her take it away.
Thank you again, Christina, for such a lovely discussion. Thank you all for all of your feedback and responses throughout our time together. It is greatly appreciated. We truly enjoyed the engagement. We will make the recording of this presentation available on our Facebook and YouTube page within 48 hours from today. If you want us to email this information to you, please drop your emails in the chat so I can send a follow-up email. And join us for our next webinar. We are working on closing out this 2022 Disruptive Leadership Series. And up next, we have From Buddy to Boss. We have in the past have had a lot of people, come to us and want to know more about how you move from peer to manager. So that will be taking place next month, Thursday, September the 29th. And on behalf of the Leadership Institute at Columbus State University, thank you again for all of your interest and engagement. Sorry about that. And if you want to reach us, please email us at leadershipinstitute@columbusstate.edu. And you can reach us on all social media platforms using @CSU Leadership. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you all next month.